Let's start first on the defensive side of the ball. The defense was flying around, man. Now, a spring game format where the offense really calls a very vanilla game plan, it really favors the defense. I talked about that in my preview with Doug Scott of the QB11 show that, defense normally in a spring game, they usually have a little bit of better showing. Offense doesn't want to put as much on film. We all know the deal, certainly when it comes down to that. But, man, I look at this defense, and they were really, really flying around the football. Let's start first, and let's talk about that pass rush, because it wasn't just one guy. It wasn't just Mateo. It wasn't just two guys. It was a whole bunch of guys that were getting in there into the backfield. Elijah Rushing got in there, I think, one time. Blake Purchase had a really good spring game. He was getting into the backfield multiple times. How did this guy redshirt last year? Man, he's an extremely, extremely talented guy. Purchase some Blake this year. No question about that. But I thought he was doing a really good job. Amari Washington even got in there certainly as well. So I thought a lot of cast of characters was getting in there as it pertained to the pass rush in this game. This defense is here to play. And they were really good, certainly from a pass rush standpoint. Let's talk about those young freshman defensive backs. Okay. We've heard Tosh Lupoi say it in a press conference. We've heard Chris Hampton certainly say it in a press conference that says, hey, the traits. We're looking for guys that have longer wingspan. We're looking for guys that are taller. We're looking for guys that are faster, really to step up the level of what the secondary has been for the Ducks in the past years. And there were two plays that really stuck out to me, and they were both in goal line situations. They both prevented touchdowns, and they both led to field goals. It was early in the game. Trey McNutt was going up against the much larger Jamari Johnson, right? When you take a look at a red zone situation, throw the ball up for your big tight end, Jamari Johnson. Usually, that's a pretty good matchup for the offense. But Trey McNutt, great timing to be able to punch that ball away. That ended up forcing a field goal. I can't remember if that was a third down or the next play was a third down, but I thought that was great. Really, going up against, and then you look at Naeem Offord a little bit later on during this game. Naeem making a very similar play. I believe that was a third down, going up against an experienced wide receiver like someone like Malik Benson during this game, and he makes the play. I thought these corners really stepped up and played really well. I thought as a whole that there was a lot of really good play in the secondary in this game. I think late in the game you saw a big play. I think that was the slant pattern to Dylan Gresham where he caught it and then he went for the touchdown. But overall, there weren't a lot of big plays. Now, we circle back to this being a spring game. We circle back to the play calling being very vanilla. We have to make sure that we know that. We have to make sure that we understand that, okay? But that being said, I thought in one-on-one situations, one-on-one coverage situations, I thought the Oregon defensive backs were very, very good. One guy, see, it's interesting because Theron Johnson is a guy where you look at him at Northwestern as a former all Big Ten corner. A lot of teams kind of threw opposite his way. He was really good in man-to-man coverage, and he was very highly graded in terms of man-to-man coverage. There were two instances where I think he gave up plays, but I think it's more of a credit to the wide receivers in those situations. Of course, everybody's going to want it. This clip is going to be played all through the offseason. The great catch along the sidelines, but Dakorien Moore. But Theron Johnson was right there. He was right there exactly where he needed to be in coverage. Sometimes a receiver just makes a play. So I thought Theron was one of those guys, along with the freshman defensive backs that were tight in coverage, that were doing a really good job. And that's something that maybe we haven't seen the last couple of years. So I think that was pretty promising what we were able to see from these defensive backs throughout this game as well. Overall, I thought the defense was very, very good. No Aiden Breland in there today. No Devin Jackson in the spring game as well today. Let's talk about this quarterback room. Let's talk about Luke Moga. Let's also talk about Achilles Smith Jr. because all of the focus is going to be on Dante Moore, and all the focus was going to be on Austin Novosad. And Luke Moga, his athleticism is very exciting. I was kind of watching throughout this game, and I'm like, boy, I wonder if they would put a Wildcat type of package together for like the regular season for somebody like Luke Moga, who, he did certainly show some things throwing the football down the field. But his athleticism, I think, is what really stood out. And I thought he put some decent drives together to be able to move the football down the field as well. Let's talk about Akili Smith Jr., kind of a taller kid, bigger frame at the quarterback position. I thought that he did some decent things. As an early enrollee, true freshman coming out of San Diego, California, he's got some boogie. Not only does he have that, pocket passer type of frame, but he can really, when the play breaks down, we saw him a couple of times really get outside the pocket and make plays with his legs. I think I was really focused on what 15 was going to do. I was really focused on Akili Smith Jr. to see, because when a lot of people talk about Akili, they talk about him being maybe a developmental piece. But we've talked on this show, we've talked about Jared Curtis possibly coming to Oregon. We're going to know about that very, very soon. Ryder Lyons is maybe a guy that's been in the mix. Like, there's a lot of these other quarterbacks that you talk about in Nashville as well. Well, we get a year of Dante, maybe 2 years of Dante, maybe you throw in a year of Austin Novosad or something else in there as well. And then we're just going to move on to these freshman quarterbacks. But you got a guy sitting right here and right now in Akili Smith Jr. that I thought had a pretty good showing in his first action and his first televised action that we've been able to see in the spring game. So I thought he did a pretty good job in this game, all things considered. All right, let's talk about Dante Moore. This is the first real sample size that we have seen out of Dante. Now, I will say this. From a starting quarterback standpoint, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, it's a little bit more difficult to get into a rhythm and get into a rhythm and get into a rhythm and get into a rhythm when you're not going out there every single series. And it's not just the quarterback, right? It's every position on the field. The more reps that you're going to get, the more confident that you're going to be able to get, that you're going to be able to work some of the things out that may or may not be working in a given football game right now. But Dante made some really good throws. He made some really good throws in this game. I remember early in the game, I think it was his first drive of the game, where he floats it over. Was it a linebacker? It might have been a linebacker or a safety going to Kenyon Sadiq. And it was just a picture perfect throw right there. And they got 20 plus yards on that specific play. When it comes to Dante, quick decision making, it seemed like he was comfortable. Like, this is like we said, we're going to keep on saying it because I think a lot of people are going to be like, well, Ted, you said he looked really good. Well, it is a vanilla spring game type of atmosphere, so we need to kind of take everything with a grain of salt. But I thought Dante was quick with his decision making. I thought he was smart with his decision making. I thought that he knew exactly when he needed to get outside of the pocket and to be able to make a play. And then he was able to make the plays down the field. Like, I thought we saw some good things from Dante, but it's just we didn't see enough of a sample size to really garner a full and regulated opinion. We saw some good things here. Hey, maybe he threw it a little bit into coverage over here as well, but that's what you get. That's what you get out of a spring game, so it really shouldn't be all that surprising. Sadiq is a stud, duh. Like, out of all of the guys that we saw, both offense and defense in this football game, on both of those sides of the ball, I thought one guy really stood out as like, okay, this guy's going to be a starter, and this guy certainly showed out in this football game as well. And that being Kenyon Sadiq. They put him all over the football field. I mentioned early in the game where Dante Moore floated the ball just right over the hand of the linebacker, right in there to Kenyon Sadiq, and he made a really good catch. And then you kind of saw in the second half of that game when they're moving the ball down the field, I think Brock Thomas was leading the offense at that particular moment in time, where Kenyon they were splitting him out wide. He was that tight end. Like, none of this is surprising to you and me. None of this should be surprising in and of the slightest. Kenyon Sadiq is an absolute stud. Duh. And I thought that he had a really good game in this one. And you saw bits and pieces of his athleticism and his versatility Obviously we didn't see Evan Stewart in this game, but man, you certainly saw Kenyon Sadiq, and he's going to be like, I can imagine. And I'm watching this spring game. I'm starting to the wheels are starting to spin a little bit through my head, where I'm like, all right, Sadiq's lined up in the slot or out wide or wherever they put him in a given situation. And then you have someone like Jamari Johnson in there at tight end. It was so fun to see. Let's talk about the run game. Let's talk about the run game a little bit. Mekhi Hughes was a very straightforward runner. I think when we saw him during this game, I think he was no nonsense, point A to point B, which is good. We kind of saw him, and boy, he's ripped. He is he's a big boy, certainly running the football, but he's certainly agile running the football. I thought we'd see a little bit more out of Dink Riggs throughout this game. We didn't see as much. We saw De'Air Hill in there for a little bit. I don't know if we saw Jordan Davison get into the game and to be able to run the football in this one. There was no box score. There was no box score in this one. I was looking online for one, and maybe someone was keeping one, but I couldn't find one. But I thought the run game was solid. But maybe I was expecting a little bit more chunk plays. Of course, you had that first touchdown from Jaden Lamar where he took it and he went in for an explosive touchdown. That was the first touchdown on the board to make that 7-0. Jay Harris, he was kind of the star of the spring game last year, and he really stood out for this Ducks team last year, the Division II transfer. Kind of an up and down game a little bit for Jay Harris because he had that carry, fumble, scoop and score going back the other way. Ife Obadegu putting his shoulder on the football, and then Blake Purchase scooping it and scoring it going back the other way. And then he comes back a little bit later on, puts together a couple of good carries. He eventually gets a touchdown down there by the goal line where he just keeps his feet churning and gets into the end zone. So, up and down. And that's maybe been the story of Jay Harris in Eugene throughout his time over here as well. But I think overall what we can take from the running back room is this is a really deep room this year. So those were kind of my takeaways